The mainstream media have been planning something for weeks and weeks. They waited, they broke the rules themselves to bring down one man, Dominic Cummings, Boris Johnson's chief advisor. Now, I'm sure you've all heard the last couple of days there's been a chaotic situation in the government. Boris Johnson's team have been in trouble because we found out that Dominic Cummings, just after the lockdown was introduced, travelled to the north of England with his family to essentially stay there to recover and to stay away from everything in London. Now, yesterday I made a video. I tried not to take any side at the time to make sure I get the facts first. Now, last night we had Dominic Cummings doing a press conference in Downing Street to give all the facts to the journalists. We had trial by media, which is a fascinating concept. Now that we know the facts and the truth, it's easy to know what the reality is. So let's talk about the facts first. Then I'm going to talk about how Dominic Cummings has won this game and has destroyed the mainstream media's plot, especially people like Piers Morgan and everybody who are taking things personally. So the story is, the lockdown was introduced, and he, his wife, and his child went up north. And at the time, people said you're not supposed to travel. At the same time, the reality is that there were exceptional circumstances where you can relocate. This is according to the government advice. Clearly, if you have adults who are unable to look after a small child, this is an exceptional circumstances. This was Jenny Harris on 24th of March. So this is one issue. So in this case, he didn't do anything wrong in terms of, well, he didn't break the rules. There's a difference between breaking the rules and doing something that's in a grey area. Second problem was that they said, well, then he travelled back to London afterwards. He is a key worker, and key workers are allowed to travel to go to work. No one is even talking about this. Even Dominic himself, he didn't mention this yesterday at the press conference. Key workers were always an exceptional case. It's not like an ordinary person who randomly drives around or gets a train to different places in the country to picnic. He's a key worker and he was allowed to travel to work. And the third problem was that they said that before he actually travelled all the way back to London, he did a bit of a drive around and he went to Barnard Castle and he stayed there for a few minutes, and then he got back into the car. He basically said that he did decide to seek medical advice before he did that, and he was just trying to make sure that his eyesight is working, some ridiculous thing, and apparently it was fine. So he didn't even break the rules when it comes to having bad eyesight and driving. Some people kicked off saying, well, if your eyesight is bad, you shouldn't drive. Well, apparently that wasn't the case either. But that's all irrelevant, because what we're going to talk about is the mainstream media. We had my good friend Tom Harwood from Guido Fawkes talking about the hypocrisy of the mainstream media and people on the left. It's not necessarily just the lefties. You have a anti-Boris cult, the anti-Dominic Cummings cult, who have a personal vendetta against it. They've always had it. Let's listen to Tom and come back.
And ultimately, there are cases in this country of politicians who have indefatigably broken the rules, like the Labour Welsh Health Secretary who took a picnic against the rules of his government, like Stephen Kinnock, who drove hundreds of miles to see his parents, like Tahir Ali, the Labour MP who went to a funeral with 100 other people, like Kevin Jones, the Labour MP who went to a birthday party. Now, these are clear breaches of the rules, and yet Keir Starmer has not called for them to go, and yet Dominic Cummings' case is not a clear breach of the rules. There might be some ambiguity to do with how it looks, and I'll certainly agree with you, it's not a good look and it has taken up media time. But is it really the case that something that is within the letter of the law but doesn't look very good is worth a resignation? And yet those 4 Labour politicians who've done far more than Dominic Cummings to break and really make a mockery out of the rules and they stay and they keep their jobs. I think that that is an outrageous double standard perpetuated by a media that was outside Dominic Cummings' house yesterday, standing shoulder to shoulder, packed in like sardines, making the most horrendous mockery out of those restrictions and calling him a hypocrite. I think that the double standards here are extraordinary and need to be exposed.
He's right. That this was the plan all along by the media and the anti-Cummings cult that were planning to do this for a long time. And it's got nothing to do with right or wrong. It's a personal vendetta. And the manipulation by the media is a very strong thing because they have obviously managed to change public opinion against one man and now Boris's team as a whole. And this was the whole problem. This is why when Cummings did the press conference yesterday to clarify everything, this was, you know, a rare situation. You don't really have advisors having a press conference in Downing Street. He managed to completely win the argument, and because the plan was to force Boris Johnson to fire him, and they failed. He came out in a very open and honest way. He even admitted the bits where he kind of said, well, maybe that was wrong, but he didn't actually break the rules. And that's it. The media lost the argument. But they did one thing. They have managed to damage the British mentality. This mob mentality is now being created. Look what they did in outside Dominic Cummings' house, his neighbours turning against him.
My dad's had 3 shoulder operations. Stanmore have left him without his shoulder, and she won't even let him walk in the garden, won't let him go to the park, won't let him sit on the bench. She won't even entertain me in her garden with a tent.
Would you recommend Bernard Castle for a day out?
I'm a single parent. I've had no childcare since the beginning of this whole mess. Not that I can afford to pay for any childcare.
Also, let's not forget that he does live in Islington, which is a socialist heartland. So they're not necessarily all of them Tory voters or supporters. But the biggest problem that we have in this whole thing is that the media, what they did, the hypocrisy of them. This is a picture we have outside of Dominic Cummings' house where the journalists, the mob, are breaking the social distancing measures themselves just to win an argument. This is the hypocrisy of the media, where they are going after one person who, in terms of technicality, he hasn't broken any rules because, again, traveling back to London, he was a key worker, traveling up north, it was special circumstances, and the people who said, oh, but what about me and my situation? Well, if your situation was also, you know, special circumstance, then you could have done it as well. The issue with this whole thing is that the government weren't too clear about any of this, and this is the fault of Boris Johnson and his team as a whole. But let's not forget the hypocrisy of this, because you even had Dominic's father actually speaking out. He said that you're not suffering from people being on your doorstep, poking cameras in your face, and more than that, a 4-year-old boy is having to walk through a scrum to be with his mum and dad. If you think that's the way to behave, shame on you. And that's the point. Because, you know, what we're talking about in this video, because I mentioned the whole technicality stuff, that's all irrelevant at this point, because we're now talking about the behavior, this mob mentality, and this the hypocrisy of certain people. We even had Sky News after this going to Dominic Cummings' father's house. Why?
No one was answering questions today at the family farm where Dominic Cummings stayed. Well, Mr. Cummings, who are you? James Matthews from Sky News. How do you think your son is being treated?
I mean, is this the way to behave? It's kind of embarrassing, doorstepping someone who's not even in politics. We added a tweet like this because not everybody's turning against Cummings. The only thing that this manufactured outrage over Dominic Cummings will achieve is to make people like me, someone who voted Tory for the first time in 2019, who has lost a fair bit of confidence in them since then, more sympathetic towards the government. Thank you, media. This is what you've created. And Dan Hodges also said, I wrote at the very start of lockdown that I was concerned where we were heading with all this, having seen all those vultures who claim to be Cummings' neighbours taunting him in the street, I see I was right to be concerned. We've completely lost our way. You're more than, this is a free country. We are supposed to be here to criticize the people in the position of power, the government, politicians, and everybody. Criticizing is different to taunting and intimidating. We had Mike Graham on Talk Radio slightly losing it because of the way the media have been handling this situation. Let's watch this clip.
Just some housekeeping I need to do. Here's the front page of The Guardian, ladies and gentlemen, today. No apology, no explanation. PM bets all on Cummings. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go. Daily Mirror, a cheat and a coward. That's going as well. What a load of old cobblers. And listen, last but not least, the Daily Mail. What planet are they on? What planet are you on? You used to be a Tory supporting paper. Surely, Greg, you're a disgrace.
Absolutely brilliant. The whole issue is that, people should stop being tribal. And this is exactly why I didn't take any sides yesterday until the press conference, because it doesn't matter if this is a Tory government or a Labour government, if it's left or right or any of that. Just go with the facts and reality. And now that we know the truth, it's easy to make up your mind. And also, do not forget that the public opinion has changed because of the media manipulation and because of the way they have been handling this thing. And it's not just them, it's the establishment. You had someone in the civil service breaking the actual code of civil service yesterday, I believe, and tweeted this: arrogant and offensive. Can you imagine having to work with these truth twisters? This was tweeted using the official UK civil service Twitter account. Now, there's an investigation going on to find out who it was. The person who tweeted this broke the rules to say that someone else has broken the rules. Brilliant, guys. And then you had the Labour Party. Look at all these MPs. It's interesting. They all tweeted the same thing. It's one rule for Boris Johnson's closest advisor, another for everybody else. This was all coordinated by Labour HQ to copy and paste all these tweets. It's not one rule for the closest advisor. It's one rule for people in special circumstances. Doesn't even matter. And also key workers. There are special cases, and this is one of them. And again, do not forget that throughout this whole journey, he continued to obey the whole kind of social distancing measures. He didn't get around anyone. He didn't get close to anyone. The members of the public, he and his family stuck together because they were one household. It's not like he was going around to kind of Tesco and like shaking hands with everybody. So that's one issue, or having picnics. We had now Conservative, we had one Tory MP who was apparently a junior minister who I had no idea who this person is. Douglas Ross, apparently. He has now resigned because of the pressure that this has created. A lot of voters out there, a lot of constituents are angry. And all these MPs, especially these new MPs, are so afraid of losing their seats that they're now obviously changing their opinion because they're getting angry emails by constituents. This is the problem we have with this political system that we have created, that politicians, they don't go with principle, they just go with fear. Oh my God, I'm going to lose my job, so I'm going to show some outrage. I don't even know who this person is. Apparently he was a bag carrier. He was an Under Secretary of State for Scotland. We don't even know who this person is. It doesn't really matter. And then the net approval ratings for Boris Johnson and his government are also collapsing. 25th of March, it was on 44% plus. 25th of March, 26%. And 25th of May, now, minus 1%. Now, we had the anti-Boris and anti-Cummings call saying, see, this is because Dominic Cummings broke the rules. The ratings were going down since the end of March. And the moment that Boris Johnson announced that he wants to ease the lockdown measures, the public were in favour of the lockdown because they're afraid, because of the way the government and the media scared everybody into believing in the lockdown. They thought it was a black and white situation. The approval ratings have been going down for weeks before this story. And yes, obviously the Dominic Cummings story also had a massive impact because people thought that he was being a hypocrite. Rightly so, that's their opinion. But the whole point of it is that people like Piers Morgan, people in the mainstream media, their attempts to bring down Boris Johnson's government kind of failed. And Dominic Cummings' strategy to come out, having that press conference, was a big move, a big risky move, and it worked. He completely destroyed the mainstream media's argument, and hopefully we can in the next few days move on. I think the government's role is going to be to change the debate by talking about easing the lockdown, opening shops, opening businesses, and we'll see how everything ends. But it's been a fun drama, and as I said yesterday, there are big problems in this country, in the world going on. People losing their jobs, people losing their lives, people losing their livelihood, and mental health issues. And these idiots are concerned about with political gossip. So this is what we have for now. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell next to it. And also, don't forget to support the channel by becoming a member and follow me on social media. I've realized a lot of people are following me on Twitter, but not Instagram. Get your Instagram, follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I'm Tousi, and I'll see you guys in the next video.